Hi guys, welcome to another video from Rebelstar Gaming, and today we're taking a quick look at one of my old favourites. It's Rebelstar on Spectrum. So Rebelstar is a turn-based strategy game where you have the raiders versus the operatives. The operatives are the current possessors of the space station, and the raiders are the guys breaking into it so they can get in and either eliminate all of the defenders or destroy Isaac, who is a computer responsible for breaking the raiders' secret codes. And it's tough. Oh god, this came out in 86, beg your pardon. It came out in 86, so Lee was 7 in 80s in 86, and I remember playing this to death. I beat it as well. I did beat it back in the day. There's a few bits and pieces you need to know to like really get the most out of it. In single player games you can play as the raiders. In 2-player games you can play as either the raiders or the operatives. So I used to play against myself sometimes because I wanted to play the operatives sometimes because they had different units and they're a bit weirder and they had some cool units. So most of the time, if you play at one player, you will be the raiders, the guys that are breaking the yellow fellers. They have just sort of men and blastoids. I think they have 3 or 4 blastoids. And the blastoids look very much like R2-D2. So no prizes for where the inspiration came from there. Also not helped by the fact that some of the men are armed with laser sabers. So once again, I think we can all guess where that's coming from. But they do have a plethora of weapons. I think there's 3 or 4. You have laser pistols, you have laser rifles, and you have, I can't remember the name, photon cannons, I think. I always liked the photon cannons. I think you had about 2 of them in your team because they would fire very cheaply and be chock full of ammo, which became a problem, specifically around the blastoids, because they had blast torches, which were tremendously damaging, very short range, and were the only thing to open locked doors. But they also had very little ammo and there was no way to replenish it, so you had to be very careful in how you used it. The blastoids themselves were incredibly tough, so you could just basically walk up to enemies, sustain a turn of fire as you stood next to them, and then just pew, down you go, boy. As you know, because it was just so strong. There was a method for the raiders to actually get more reinforcements by destroying 3 defense computers around the base, and that allowed you to get like a wave of reinforcements come in, which was good if you didn't have a blastoid with any ammo left and there was just like one bad guy and a locked door between you and your objectives. So there's that. The operatives had a much more diverse roster of combatants. They had the sentry droids, which were like these bipedal, I don't know, they always reminded me of something, but I can't remember what. They've got basically a laser head, which is like a round bit with a bit sticking out, like almost like a duck. You had patrol droids, which are these tiny little fly things that could fire fucking tons of shots, but they didn't do very much damage, at least to your blastoids. And they didn't take very much damage either. You could put them down quite easily. What else did they? And they had androids, which looked kind of funky actually. They were like sort of, imagine Zool with a helmet on, I think is the best way. There's sort of craggy armor type thing going on. And they actually had like a master control droid who looked like a snake, or a snake's head. He was tough as well. He didn't do tons of damage because he was armed with like a pistol, but he could take a licking and keep on ticking. Oh, it is a difficult game though, because not only do you have like the raiders, I think, are overall the weaker force. When you come from the base, you're kind of like a sitting duck, so if the defense is set up correctly against you, the computer, depending on the difficulty level, you can go from difficulty, I think, 1 to 9. I always play it on 1 and still get my ass kicked a lot of the time. But yeah, so if they set up the defense as you break into the base, there's not a lot you can do about it because you're fairly exposed when that happens. There's like an entrance in the south of the base where you come through, and it basically just opens up onto a hallway. And if you set up like units at either end of it, you can launch the raiders as they come through, pretty much. But it did a lot of innovative things, and is linkable to actually XCOM becoming a thing as well. It was a definite inspiration, because you had the choices of how you shot. So you could have an aim shot, which cost more action points, or you could have a snapshot, which cost less, but also had a lower chance to hit, which was cool. Also, it had like, I mean, it was like this aiming thing where you had like a reticle, and it sort of transitioned the map to just circles rather than like icons, so it looked like you were in some sort of fancy targeting sort of thing. Obviously, it was just a way of selecting which unit you wanted to shoot at, and then pressing the button and have him shoot. But outside of that, I mean, it's really is a really well done game. I mean, having played recently, obviously the capture footage from this, I was surprised just how little there was that I was missing about like some of the newer stuff. I mean, it really did have like all the core tenets you would look for in this sort of game, really well established in it. Yeah, I mean, it didn't have like a lot of the fluff, like you didn't have the one map, you didn't have like a base that you built up, the squads weren't that customizable. Well, but you did have stuff like where, say one of your photon cannons got shot and killed. You go over to the body and take the photon cannon off of him with another guy. You couldn't do that with the blastoids. Only the blastoids could use the blast torches, which is a bit, damn it. Because that would have made it a whole lot easier if we could have done that. But yeah, so the raiders really have to protect their blastoids. They're kind of outnumbered. Well, they are outnumbered. And depending on how they set up their forces, they can be mulched as soon as they come through the door. In addition to that, they have a certain amount of time. And if the timer runs out, I think it's an inbuilt one. I don't think there's any actual on-screen display for it. It just, if the time runs out, it's just game over and raiders lose. All along with this, it had some fantastic Spectrum bleepy sound effects. All the laser shots, all the stuff like that, really good. And it did this marvellous thing when you change turn, which you will have heard by now, because I would have completed at least one turn by the time I've gone to this. But it was just, how you just playing it, you're like, okay, it's got pew pew noises, fine, and then you end the turn, and it's like, first time hearing that, it's like, whoa, damn. I don't know, maybe I'm just easy amused, but it's a surprisingly great game. It really does have a lot of the turn-based sort of gameplay really stapled down well. If you're interested in stuff like this, then give it a go. One thing I will say is don't forget to arm over your raiders, because at the start of the game, none of them have their weapons out. So you need to go in and actually make them take out and equip their weapons. Otherwise you run through the door and you're like, oh, I can't shoot, shit. And you get more, I'm out of action points, that's not good. And then you'll die horribly. I never understood that. I suppose it's just so you familiarise yourself maybe with the characters' inventories. I say characters, they don't have names already. Well, they have names, but they all have the same model and there's no personality because you just move around and shoot. But yeah, some have different inventories. Like you have guys that have medical gear, you have other guys that have a selection of weapons. Generally speaking, I use the laser saber. Yeah, copyright, beware. Laser saber very much, because generally the raiders are quite squishy outside of the blastoids. So yeah, getting up close to something that's going to be able to shoot you quite a lot on the way in is not a great idea. I think it's most well used when you've managed to flank and you're kind of close anyway, so you can switch it over and get a few lobs in there. But yeah, it's just a great game. I think the only thing I would have liked to have seen in it would be access to like grenades. There's no like area effect weapons. It's all line of sight sort of pew-pews and running up to and just whacking them. And the blastoids do have a melee attack. You can just run into them because you're a big lump of metal. It's not particularly damaging, but sometimes it is necessary because, as I say, they don't have very many shots in their blast torches. I think it's about 4. So, yes, not great. And you need to get through at least like 2 doors. So, yeah. And the actual core of Isaac that you need to destroy utterly is like 5 blocks. So you need to destroy sort of 5 parts of it. and then that takes quite a lot of damage as well. But back in the day, it was well received by a number of the publications at the time. So Crash gave it 93%, making it a Crash smash. I actually used to get used. I didn't used to get it often, but I occasionally got Crash when I saw a new show. Back when I was a child, because it came with a cassette and sometimes it had games on it, so that was good. And it ranked as the second greatest Spectrum game of all time by Your Sinclair. Interesting fact. I actually had a letter published in Your Sinclair as a child, moaning about Midnight Resistance. No, I wasn't moaning about Midnight Resistance. What was I about? I was moaning about Target Renegade. Because that's going to make me popular. Moaning about one of the best games ever released on the Spectrum. Yes. No, it was. I just complained that there needed to be a break from all of the fighting in it. I was clearly a cerebral child. And it was published, and they suggested I try Midnight Resistance, which I never did. So, screw you, but I got my name in print as a child, so there you go. Anyway, they gave it second greatest game of all time. It's just an example of how the wargaming genre could be an experience, unrivaled thrills by all, but the most adrenaline-pumping blaster. And one of the nice things about it is, I believe it was in Firebird's silver range, which meant it was £1.99p. Back in the day, you can't get a cup of fucking coffee for that anymore. But yeah, you used to buy games at newsagents. You used to be like on a little spindle at the counter, and you'd just be there, buying your paper, and you'd be like, oh, I'll buy a video game as well. That just used to be it. You used to be like, video games were like cheap enough to be like impulse buy items. And Firebird were, they were one of the main proponents of that back in the day. I had so many Firebird games, it was ridiculous. When you got a Firebird game, you always knew, okay, it may not be the best thing since sliced bread, but it's going to be a fun time. And generally speaking, it was the case, except for when they did it on purpose. I believe they released Don't Buy This, which I of course bought, where they took like 4 of the worst games they could find and put it out on sort of a compilation tape. But it was cheap and funny, and you could twat moles in the head with a dog's tail. Probably don't ask. Anyway, guys, I've gone off topic there a little bit. So yes, Rebelstar, obviously available via emulation from all your good emulator places. I don't think you're going to get in too much trouble. I'm not sure how many people are making money based off the sale of Rebelstar 86 nowadays. I understand it's not the only game in the series. There was Rebelstar 2 and Rebel Raiders, I think, preceded it. I never played Rebel Raiders. I did play Rebelstar 2. I have no idea when, but I didn't like it as much. I think they got a little bit. They tried to get a little bit too fancy and sort of lost the simplicity that I liked in the original one. I think there was an even more recent one. Yeah, I think it was Game Boy Advance? Yeah, it was like Rebelstar Tactical or something. I don't know. I didn't play any of them except for Rebelstar itself. And I must say, it was very good back in the day on the old ZX Spectrum. I had a 48K Plus, before you ask. There you go. It's the Plus that made it. And then we went to a Plus 3 and had a sexy diskette. Which, of course, was mostly an Amstrad. But, because it was bought by Alan Sugar, wasn't it? And rolled into sort of the Amstrad line. But it still retained its Spectrum sort of thing. But you had like the Plus 2, which was very similar to the Amstrad model. I can't remember which one, but the one that had the integrated tape deck. And then they did the Plus 3, which had like the diskette, the 3.5 inch diskette, I want to say. But for someone that had been waiting like between 5 and 10 minutes for a game to load off a cassette tape, that was amazing, man. Fucking hell, little diskette, you pop it in. Give it a few seconds, it goes, and then you're playing fucking Star Wars Arcade. Brilliant. I only had about 5 games for it though, but they were well played. We actually wore off some of the labels on the edge of the disc from grubby fingers of myself and my father. So yes. Anyway, I just like to talk about spectrums, really, I guess. But anyway, we're going to leave it there. If should you get the chance to experience Rebelstar, I highly recommend you do. Don't go in expecting like an XCOM beta or anything, but certainly for one of the pioneers of the genre, it got a lot of things right. A lot of things. Just protect your Blastroids and don't forget to equip your weapons. And with that, I'll catch you next time, guys. Take it easy.